What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Stone, entrepreneur and marketing analytics student at UMD. I interview student entrepreneurs to share their stories and business strategies. Today's guest will speak about his crazy story and personal branding. He has a ton of experience with business and personal branding, from starting his business when he was only 14 years old and growing his business for the last 6 years, to now running workshops and educational programs around the world as a 20-year-old. He'll be sharing his story and how his education has played a role in it. I encourage you to go check out iamscottmiller.com to find out more information about him. And I'm excited to introduce you all to the owner of Bop Industries, Scott Millar. Hey, Scott, super happy to have you here on the Student Built Startups podcast. I'll have you start off by saying hello to everyone listening and sharing one crazy but true fact about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to having a chat today and sharing a couple of tips and stories. So my name's Scott Millar. I'm the 20-year-old CEO and founder of a tech education company called Bop Industries. And a crazy fact about me is that I started this company back when I was 14. But before that, I spent 3 years living in China, in Shanghai as a kid, which was lots of fun.
Oh, wow. That is really cool. How did you like China? Was it kind of weird transitioning into a different culture? Or?
Yeah, I loved it. Like, I was lucky. I went over there when I was 8 years old. So I kind of was super flexible and just kind of adapted really quickly. And it was such a fabulous experience, like getting to live in China, getting to travel all across Asia as a child. I think it's built a really awesome appreciation for Asian culture, but also to open my eyes to now I'm probably over there 6 to 8 times a year for work. And yeah, just really opened my eyes to the amazing economy that is Asia. Like, there's 3 billion people for me in Australia sitting right on my doorstep. And just the way they operate is absolutely fascinating as a economy.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard so many great things about going and immersing yourselves in other cultures. And I hear that you learn a ton of new things, and it really opens your eyes to a lot of new kind of ideas. Heard a lot of great things about that. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a really great country. Would highly recommend.
All right. Well, I'll have you share a little bit with the audience about your education and entrepreneurial story, including some details about your business, Bop Industries.
Absolutely. So Bop is a tech education company. We work with primary and high school students, predominantly teaching them about entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, and math, and innovation, showing them the amazing things they can do at any age from anywhere. So we get to work with big corporates around the world, like Accenture, Virgin Australia, and we've got a few exciting corporates coming on board soon that I can't quite mention yet, but cool tech companies, and showing them the amazing stuff happening in those spaces, but showing these young people how they can build their entrepreneurial skills, how they can work with technology with a focus on creativity, and do some really cool stuff even as students in primary and high school. So we deliver these programs all around the world. We started running our educational programs about 2 years ago, and in those 2 years, we've worked with over 40,000 students in over 40 locations around the world. That's across, like, I'm based here in Brisbane, Australia, but we work across Australia. We also work in China, in Singapore, Malaysia, in the US, and Germany, and get to work with some really awesome students. But it all started back as a grade 9 business project, selling keyrings at local markets as a 14-year-old.
That is an awesome story. I really like what you're doing with Bop, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, just showing young people that they can go do entrepreneurial things and being able to show them kind of how to do that and the benefits of doing that. And I really resonate with what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I definitely think, like, the great thing about entrepreneurship is, whilst not every person's going to go on and become the next Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, like, entrepreneurial skills are such an important skill set for anyone to have, especially in this future of work we keep hearing about. There's skills around thinking creatively and collaboratively, working in teams, delegating roles, and being able to adapt. And whether you're running a business or whether you're a teacher, a doctor, a flight attendant, like, these are all skills that you need to be able to have to not just survive, but also thrive in this future of work we're moving into. Yeah,
you absolutely nailed that right on the head. A lot of those entrepreneurial skills do transfer over to a lot of different areas of work. So you really got that right in the head. So what inspired you to start Bop when you were 14?
Good question. So Bop initially started when I was 14 as part of a grade 9 business program. So as part of our business studies at the school that I went to, in term 4 of every year, we get into groups, we develop products, we write business plans for them, and we pitch them to our business teachers for $100 investment. And it's kind of like a fun way to finish off the year and to put into practice a lot of the theory that you learn throughout the year as well. So my group and I, we started selling these things called hashtag keyrings. There were little keyrings made on our school's laser cutter that had a little hashtag and a word after it. So you could have hashtag Scott, hashtag sassy, hashtag Bop, anything like that. And we sold them around our school community for about a term. And within a term, we made around $400 profit, which is pretty sweet as a group of 14-year-olds. We got to split the profit and go mad on our school's tuck shop. So it was like sausage rolls, hot chips every day for lunch. And that was kind of like my first experience to running a business. Before then, I was actually a massive performing arts student. I did a lot of drama, singing, dancing, everything like that. And I was also really into aviation. So always wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. But my experience with business was getting paid to do my assignment. It was like the more time I spend on my business assignment, the more money I get to make and the more hot chips I get to eat. So I was like, this is a no-brainer. And I was one of those kids in school that I did really well academically. And I was also really involved in extracurriculars. So I was at school at 6 o'clock in the morning most days with like swimming or running training, and at school until 6 o'clock most nights with all of my performing arts, and then trying to get good grades on top of that. So trying to find time to get a part-time job as a teenager was really difficult. So I thought, you know what, let's keep selling those keyrings. Let's go to some of our local markets and see where it goes. So I saved up $35 and I got my first market stall, and I just go out every Saturday morning and sell these keyrings for $4 a piece at our local markets, and just learning about business that way. But from there, it started to grow. We started selling online on platforms like eBay and Etsy. And we just started, like, I'd sit down on a Sunday afternoon, schedule all my Facebook ads for the week, and then go to school like a normal student during the week. I'd get home at the end of the day, open up my laptop and see what orders had come through. And I just print them out on the school's laser cutter and then head down to the post office on my way home. And that was kind of how it got started. And we started selling just a handful of keyrings a month, and then it grew a few hundred keyrings a month. And then by the time I was in grade 10 as a 15-year-old, we were selling a few thousand keyrings a month to these countries all around the world, some of which I'd never even heard of, which was pretty cool pocket money for a 15-year-old as well. And yeah, like, I guess from there, we got into the tech space. I always thought, like, look, keyrings have been fun, but I want to do something exciting that can really make a difference. And that was always technology for me. But I was never a techie student. Like, I wasn't great at coding. I didn't have a great tech program at my school. So what I did was I just jumped on YouTube and I typed in cool tech tutorials. I figured if I can make something that I could sell, we'll see how that goes. And I found a tutorial teaching me how to make holograms out of some cutout CD cases. So I gave it a go. I raided Mum's CD case cabinet, and I started cutting up these CD cases, taping them together, and within an evening, I had a jellyfish floating suspended in midair on top of my phone. And it was using nothing but some CD cases, a bit of tape, and a video, like no coding required. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, imagine if I can make this technology, imagine what it's capable of. So I took it to my school's design teachers the next morning. I just started year 11 at this point, turned 16 years old. And I said to them, hey guys, I've built this thing. Can you help me turn it into a real product people might actually pay money for? And they're like, yeah, of course. So I spent every morning, every lunch, every afternoon in our school's design labs for about a week, just prototyping, designing, and building. And within a week, we launched our first product, just saying on eBay and Etsy to our customers, like, hey, we have no idea what you're going to use this tech for, but can you send us some photos and videos for a bit of inspiration? And that's what they did. We had parents in the UK sending us photos and videos of their holographic pets they'd created for their kids, and even recording themselves reading bedtime stories, like recording their grandparents to read bedtime stories to the kids at night as they fell asleep. We had teachers in Singapore using it to teach their students. We could have Winston Churchill or Cleopatra standing inside the classroom presenting to students. And back in Australia, we had a lot of events and marketing companies reach out, one of which was the events team at a luxury car brand. They reached out and they said, hey, Scott, we've got a big event coming up. We need to meet with you as soon as possible to get some holograms. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just started year 11. I took the next morning off school. I pulled on my best pair of jeans and marched into the city and had a meeting with them. And I found myself meeting with their entire events and marketing team, where they sat me down and they said, Scott, we've got a big event coming up in 2 weeks' time. We need to order 200,000 holograms from you, and we have about $500,000 to spend. What can you do for us? And I'm sitting there as a 16-year-old, like, how much tuck shop I can buy with $500,000. I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy the school tuck shop. And it was crazy. Like, I then started getting drilled about my supply chain, my risk mitigation, where my factories were, who my investors were. And I was like, guys, I'm 16 years old. I've got a rundown laser cutter in dad's backyard. I've got a math exam in like 2 hours. So can we wrap this up? Like, are you going to pay me, or what's happening here? And I expected them to laugh me out of the room. But what was really cool is they said, no, we understand that your generation, you think about technology in such a different way. And we want to harness those ideas to help us thrive in this innovation economy and to help us stay ahead of our competitors. So what we did was we sat down and they kind of became my target customers. And I asked them as much as I could about the technology, found out exactly what they wanted, how much they wanted to pay for it, how they wanted it to work. And I designed a product specifically for the events and marketing space, which kind of as a business owner is your ideal scenario where you have a customer coming to you saying, hey, we've got a stack of cash and we really want this product. Could you build it for us? We'll tell you exactly what we want. And if you can build it, that's perfect. So I built it and we started getting out to as many different events as possible throughout year 11 and year 12. And by the time I was graduating high school, I was running one of Australia's leading holographic entertainment companies. I was missing about 5 weeks of school every term, traveling around the world. And it was crazy. Like I go from presenting to the executive team of a big company down in Sydney, Australia, flying back home to Brisbane and then doing a math exam that afternoon. I even had one instance where I was partying with a prime minister of one of the European countries in a club in Thailand. I flew back to Australia and then the next day got a detention because I'd handed in an assignment late. It was kind of like the Hannah Montana life of business. But it was really cool. Like it put me in a great position where as a 17-year-old, I was graduating high school and I'd gotten the grades that I needed to get into the courses I applied for in university. I had universities approaching me with scholarship offers because of my business experience. I had clients reaching out asking me to do more work for them, but I also had a bunch of companies reaching out with job offers. So whilst a lot of my friends were freaking out about what grades they were going to get, what they were going to do at university, I was kind of sitting there looking at, I've got all these options. Where do I want to go? And I ended up turning down those offers and running the business full time. And that was when we had a lot of teachers reaching out, just saying, hey, Scott, like we've seen your story. We've been following you for a few years. Can you help us teach our students how to do what you did? Like there's a big push for 21st century skills these days. And we're not sure how to deliver them. Can you help us out? So I just, with a couple of friends, jumped on a plane up to regional Queensland, started running some programs, and that became Bop Education. And in that time, we've worked with 40,000 young people since the start of 2018. And we have delivered these programs to public schools, private schools, international schools all around the world, which has been just a genuine pleasure. So as a 20-year-old, it's a pretty crazy life. Like I manage a team of about 19 people. I'm usually, when there aren't travel restrictions, I'm usually in a different country every month, a different city every week. Get to go from talking to CEOs about innovation and the power of young people to running into classrooms full of preschool students and using design thinking and craft to build robots. So it's, a really, really fun time.
Wow, you have accomplished a lot as a 20-year-old. That is crazy.
Thank you. No, it's been crazy, but I absolutely love it. Like I always say that I just get genuinely excited about the work we do. And I work crazy hours and I do a lot. I've done a lot to get here, but I just genuinely get so excited talking about it because the change we're making and the impact we're making is, really heartwarming.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always hear that people who are very passionate about what they do, they never complain about having to go do it. They're always excited. And I think that's kind of what people need to lean into, is leaning into their passions and doing what really gets them excited. And that was a very impressive story about how you did that as a student. And as a 14-year-old kid in school, you were able to put all the pieces together. Did you have a lot of help from teachers and stuff kind of guiding you? And
yeah, absolutely. I say mentors. I wouldn't be where I am now without my mentors. They've been so invaluable. And that's what I always encourage young people, go out and just find some really good mentors, because chances are they've been through the same challenges that you face and they've probably they've overcome those challenges in some way. So whilst what worked for them might not always work for you, it'll just give you some insight. But also they can be a cheerleader when you need a cheerleader, and they can be a critic when you need a critic. But for me, it was, my teachers really helped get me off the ground in those early days and really helped give me a lot of guidance and support. But I was fortunate that in 2015, I was able to connect with a bunch of local co-working spaces here in Brisbane. And I just went along and started just hanging out with the members, having chats. And I remember even as a 15-year-old just going along and helping set up chairs for events, helping pack up and clean and just do any odd jobs around, just to build those connections and build those relationships and find some really awesome mentors along the way.
That is cool. Yeah, I've heard a ton of good things about mentors, and I always hear having a mentor can save you a lot of headache and help you prepare for issues that you may not have seen otherwise.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the single most rewarding thing about what you're doing with Bop Industries?
Oh, that's a good question. For me, it's honestly seeing the impact we make with our student. I even was doing a workshop yesterday morning. We facilitated an online, we've totally pivoted from, we were doing everything face to face at the first week of March 2020. Now in the last week of April, everything we do is online. And we were delivering this workshop yesterday with about 80 high school students from across the state. And it was so heartwarming. Afterwards, I was getting all these direct messages from a lot of the attendees saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea I could do this sort of stuff. It was looking at a community leaders sort of program. So identifying a lot of the challenges that our communities are facing at the moment with social distancing and with COVID, but looking at how can we as young people start to make a difference and start to support our local communities and come up with initiatives to help solve some of the problems that we're facing. And it was just so heartwarming getting all these young people messaging, firstly, like sharing their ideas and the confidence in their ideas and the passion that they had, seeing how passionate they got about helping their local community. But then also, too, the messages just saying like, hey, I had no idea I could do this. I have felt so paralyzed and so numb over the past few weeks. It feels like I can't do anything. This is such a massive issue. But yeah, being able to give them that voice and give them the power and the confidence that, hey, even as a teenager, you can do some amazing things at any age from anywhere. Like these days, really all you need is a laptop and an internet connection. And you can jump on Facebook, you can jump on LinkedIn, you can build solutions, build networks. And yeah, your age and your location is really no longer a barrier. So yeah, that's probably the most heartwarming thing for me.
Okay, yeah, that is a very, very good, rewarding thing that you said there. And I can kind of resonate with what you're talking about, because I think young people, they don't always see what they can achieve. And sometimes they need a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of motivation to get them there. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the podcast, is inspire young people to go follow their passions and let them know that they have the power to achieve what they want to achieve. So
absolutely. I think that's it. Like it's all around the whole idea of, I always talk about micro-influences, saying that it's always great to look up to those people like Barack Obama and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. Like they're amazing role models, but it's for a young person that's in school today, it's almost like an unattainable goal. It's like they're a fantastic role model and a fantastic idol and something that I would love to get to. But as like a teenager sitting in school right now, I don't know how do I do that? So I always say, like, look for micro influencers, people that are 5 to 10 years older than you, that are only a few steps ahead. Because if you break that down into those bite-sized chunks, be like, all right, if I work really hard, like I always say to my students, like I'm 20 years old and I'm only 4 or 5 years older than a lot of you guys. Like if you work really hard for the next 4 or 5 years, you can be where I am. And then for me, I've got those influences as well that are like about 30 years old. I'm like, great, if I work really hard for the next 10 years, I can get to where they are. So it's breaking it down into like bite-sized, achievable chunks, but finding, those just really genuine micro-influences. Like have those big picture goals. Like for me, I'm like, I adore Richard Branson. I would love to be like that. But it's still like feels like an unattainable goal. But I've got these little influences and these little idols along the way that I can start aiming for.
Yeah, you made a great point there. I think breaking that down into trying to look not at somebody that's maybe 20, 30 years older than you, but looking at somebody who's closer to your age, but is also kind of where you want to go in the right direction, and breaking that down into smaller chunks. I think that's a very good way to go about that.
Absolutely.
Well, we're about halfway through the episode now, so we're going to take a moment for a brief advertisement. Hey there, you're listening to the Student Built Startups podcast, so I'm assuming that you like listening to things that provide great value. Well, I'm going to fill you in on a little secret that I've heard of recently on how you can get some more free audio content that'll bring great value. Audible.com is a huge library of awesome audiobooks. And the best part is that your first month is free and you get to keep the first book that you order 100% free. You don't want to miss out on this opportunity. You can get your free 1-month trial and free book at audibletrack.com/sbspod. That is audibletrack.com/sbspod. The link is in the show notes.
So I'm sure as an owner and CEO, you have a lot of priorities around your business, but what would you say is one of your top priorities and one of the things that you would say has the most importance?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it'd be 2 things actually that are like equal in their importance. The first one is the customer. Like for us, we have a lot of debates. And when we were starting, we had a lot of debates around who is our customer. Like, are we selling to teachers and parents, or are we selling to students? And for us, we always look at our students or our end users. They're the ones that actually participate in our programs and consume our content. And at the end of the day, everything we do needs to be for them. Like we need to be making stuff that they are genuinely going to enjoy. Because even if it does appeal to teachers and parents and students hate it, it's not going to get us anywhere. So we always, at the end of the day, need to make sure that everything we do, everything we build, everything we put out needs to be appealing for our students, and it needs to be different, and it needs to be engaging, and it needs to be fresh and new. But at the same time, relationships are absolutely key and absolutely vital. And whether that's relationships with our teachers, our partners, our students, anything, we need to, like, it's all around building relationships and building good relationships. These days, our world is so connected that word travels so fast. If you burn one person, the word will travel so quickly. So we always say that everything we do, like, we need to be building really strong, really good relationships with our customers, our teachers, and our students. And I think it really starts to pay off. Like, I've got this one client that I absolutely adore up in Rockhampton in regional Australia. They were one of our first clients, and she's fabulous. Like, every time I go up to Rockhampton to run some programs, she always says, she's like, Scott, don't even think about booking a hotel. You're going to come and stay with me and my family. And it's awesome. Like, I love it. And that's how close we've gotten, is like, while she's one of my top clients, like, she also just feels like family to me. So I'd say that is absolutely key. And especially while people, like, for anyone out there starting a business, like, whilst you're still small and you can have those one-on-one relationships with your different clients and partners, capitalize on that, because that's so special and they'll add so much value to you in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one little thing to add is that when you focus on the customer and the relationships that you're building, you're going to set your business up for long-term success and allow yourself to have continued growth and sustainability involved with your business, rather than just focusing on making some quick cash now. Really focusing on the relationships and customers is very important. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So what was your biggest fear when you first started this at 14, or maybe it was somewhere else along the way? But what would you say that was?
That's a really good question. I think it'd be twofold. Well, one is definitely like the imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is something that I feel 100%, like, whether I'm like on a podcast, whether I'm on a stage, or whether I'm in a classroom chatting to kids, like, there's always that little voice in the back of your head being like, especially for me, like as a 20-year-old, I was having a conversation with one of our teachers the other day, who is a part of this new school that's being built. She's been in education for like ages, and she's one of the most well-respected teachers in the country and in the state. And I was sitting there chatting to her, and like, she messaged me, she's like, hey, I've just got these ideas I want to bounce off you. I'm just not sure what to do, and I'd love your advice. And I remember being like, oh yeah, that's great. But then I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm a 20-year-old. Like, what does she want my advice for? Like, I'm not qualified for this. So that's definitely a really big issue. And I think as well, you always have doubt with the work you're doing. Like, for me, every day I'm like, are we doing the right thing? Like, am I doing the right thing? Are we really doing what we need to be doing? But then it's when you get those messages from your customers, it's like, oh, okay, yes, like what we are doing is really important. It's valid and it's valuable. So imposter syndrome is a massive struggle of mine that I've had since I started. But I think as well, like, especially when I was just starting out, age was such a big thing. Like, I was coming in there as a young person, and back when I was first getting started, I was one of the first young entrepreneurs in Brisbane, the city that I'm in. And it was really difficult, like, because a lot of adults would look at you and say, well, why should we listen to you? Like, you're just a teenager. What do you have to say? What sort of value do you have to add? And it was really difficult. Like, you've just got to keep putting yourself out there, and you've got to impress every single step of the way. Like, you can't put one foot wrong, because then you're potentially ruining the reputation for all of the other young entrepreneurs that are going to be coming after you. But I think I was really lucky where we had a few of us and we just put our best foot forward and made a really good name for young people in the local ecosystem. That was definitely a challenge when I was getting started out. But I think now more than ever, adults have realized the value of young people, of Generation Z. Like, we're the digital natives. And they've realized that we actually have got a bit of a competitive advantage compared to everyone else in this workforce, because we know technology so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bounce off of that, one of the things that I actually just learned in one of my courses revolved around how generations across the world. So somebody can live in the US and somebody can live in China, and they will almost be able to connect with each other on a similar level better than maybe somebody in the United States compared to somebody who's 50 years older than them in the United States. It's kind of crazy how a generation can bring people together so much, even more so than just being in the same location.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing for our generation. Like, I was doing this presentation the other day to a bunch of business leaders, and I was talking about, like, for me as a 20-year-old, like, I don't know a world without Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi hit the mainstream before I started primary school. The first iPhone came out when I was in grade 2, and my first phone was an iPhone 4S or something like that. And for me, like, Facebook hit 1 billion monthly active users before I was old enough to get Facebook. So the whole idea of touchscreen devices, Wi-Fi, like constant connectivity, and social media, like, I don't know a world without them. So the way I work with them is so different to how my parents work with those same devices and technologies. And I think that's really the advantage of our generation, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about personal branding. So what would you say is your personal definition of personal branding, and why is that so important?
Absolutely. Personal branding is such an interesting topic of discussion in the startup space and in the business space. I think you find it really divides people. And it was something that I struggled with a little bit as well, because I quite naturally started to build a personal brand because of me and my story. But there are a lot of other founders out there that are like, no, it should be all about your business. Like, you should never be seen. It's just your business. But for me, personal branding is building almost like a bit of an influencer brand around yourself. Now, influencer brands, they don't have to have millions and millions of followers. Like I mentioned, it can be micro-influencers. But it's using your personal brand and, yeah, really leaning into that, like becoming a bit of a thought leader and a public figure and a prominent figure as well. And for me, that's something that, yeah, as I mentioned, came quite naturally. Like with my story, a lot of the PR that was picked up on the work we were doing was about like the young teenage CEO and everything like that. And because of that, I built myself a bit of a brand in the space when it comes to talking about STEM, innovation, entrepreneurship, and young people. And it's really benefited me, I think. Like, from my perspective, Bop, like, I think my company Bop thrives. Like, when Scott Millar's personal brand does something cool, Bop grows. And then when Bop does something cool, Scott Millar grows. So it's kind of this really nice loop in this cycle where we're both growing together. But it also allows me to be able to build relationships without coming across as selling products. Like, I always find that people connect better with other people than they do with businesses. So, for example, like, we're talking about like Instagram accounts. Like, my Scott Millar Instagram account has got 2 or 3 times as many followers as the Bop Industries one, just because people like to connect with people more. And it allows me to do things like write content and deliver keynote speeches and talk about different topics as Scott Millar as opposed to as Bop. So whereas, yeah, most businesses would get charged to speak at events or to display things or seen as being very promotional, I can come in and say, hey, I'm not here to promote anything. I'm just here to have a bit of a chat and be a bit of a thought leader. But because of that, like, people find out about me and say, oh, wow, like, that was fantastic. How can we work with you? And then I can direct them through to Bop. So it's great from a thought leadership perspective, but also really good from a marketing perspective as well.
Yeah, you did a great job explaining that. You really, honestly, you cleared up a couple of things that I was confused about, to be honest. So thanks for doing that.
Pleasure.
And I'm sure everyone listening right now will thank you however they can. So if somebody's wanting to start building their personal brand, what would you say is like their first step that they should take to start moving in that direction?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, remembering that personal brands change, grow, and adapt. Like, they're not one static thing. I think that was what freaked me out when I was getting started. I was like, oh, does what I choose right now, do I have to keep doing that for the rest of my life? It's like, oh gosh, no. Like, you can keep changing and adapting and growing. So my advice would be for them, before they get started with anything, is just figure out who they are, what they stand for, and what they want to be known for. So for me, for example, like my personal brand, I come across as very bubbly, very happy, and very optimistic. And that's just kind of me. Like, it's exactly what people get when they meet me as well. I'm just a very bubbly, high energy person. But so I think, like, everyone, you've got to figure out like what your tone of voice is and what your personality is like, and try and put that on paper, but also figure out as well what sort of an angle you want to take. Like, some people are very controversial in the topics and articles that they write about. Like, they want to get a reaction from people. And because of that, people either love them or hate them. And they kind of take the whole route of like, all PR is good PR route. From my perspective, though, I'm like, look, there's so much doom and gloom in the world today. Like, I want to be that uplifting, forward thinking, optimistic voice that talks about the exciting things coming out of this. Like, I've got an article that I was just working on before this call around the new form of augmented reality, like that bridge between the physical and digital divide, and how we're going to see those come even more close together as we move forward. And looking at that bridge between online and offline learning, how we're going to see, like, a lot of students, whilst a lot of students are struggling with learning from home, a lot of students are loving it. And I think what we're going to see is, like, our schools are going to change forever. And I think that's a really exciting thing. So it's kind of like my personal brand, is I look at saying, hey, there's a lot of doom and gloom. I'm going to focus on the positives, and just figure out, like, between 2 and 5 topics, depending on how much you want to talk about stuff, like 2 to 5 topics that you really are passionate about, and just own it. Like, for me, I love talking about, STEM, innovation, entrepreneurship, the power of young people, and education. Like, they're my 5 topics that I adore talking about, and could talk like the leg off a table. Just like could wax lyrical about them all day. And just figure out your tone of voice as well, I would say. Like, how do you write articles? And think about, like, who are you writing these articles for? Like, are you going to be very formal, very informative, and very fact-based? Are you going to be very casual, a little bit cheeky, like throw in some slang words in there? Yeah, just figure out, like, your brand voice and how do you want to talk as well.
All right. Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. One thing I really liked was you said in the beginning of all that, you said that finding out like who you are and kind of your personality, I think that's a very important step, because I feel like a lot of people almost have a hard time with identifying who they are, and just being you can help you determine your personal brand. And
I think as well, like it's okay to build a character. Like I always say, so I'm like genuinely like high energy and bubbly just in my day-to-day life, but I still put on like a Scott Miller character, where I've kind of figured out, like, for me, I like to be very likable and very agreeable. And because of that, there are like certain things that I know that I have to keep in mind when I'm doing a presentation or talking to clients and stuff like that. So, and it also just, it helps me remove myself a little bit from it, where I can say, okay, I'm about to walk on stage, and it's almost like being an actor, like you get into your character. And that way you stay very true to your personal brand. You have like, yeah, it just helps a little bit, rather than as well, like taking things personally. I find like when it is just your authentic self, you can start to take things a little bit personally. But if you're like, oh, that's the Scott Miller character, and then it helps you switch off as well. Like you can go home and be like, oh, all right, like we're done. So yeah, if you like either be your authentic self, or if you struggle with that, like think of it as a character, and get into your character.
yeah, that's great. I really like that explanation there. Yeah. So what are 5 key aspects of personal branding? If you could name 5 of them.
Okay. 5 key aspects. I would say know your brand and know your voice, know your topic, write good content and high quality content, build an audience and a community, like build your followers and really stay true to them. And write what you're passionate about, but also write what your audience wants to read. Even from a business perspective, I say figure out who is your target customer, who's going to be consuming your content, who's going to be like listening to you, and everything you do needs to be for them. So yeah, just really stay true to who they are, and remember at the end of the day, why did you start this?
All right, great. Well, I think we covered most of the stuff I wanted to talk about, so we can move on to the Fast 5 section. I'll ask you 5 questions really quick, and I'm sure you'll be able to go through them pretty fast because you seem like you got a lot of energy. So. So what's the most valuable class or course that you have taken?
Oh, good question. I would say an accelerator program. We went through an accelerator program as part of our business, and every time I do them, they are just so valuable. They're kind of like, imagine a 3-year-long business degree compressed into 3 months. That's an accelerator program. And it's just like, it's fast paced, it's high value, and it's just really good to help get the basics, like learn the basics. That's what I did after graduating year 12. I was like, I don't have a business degree. I don't know how to run a business. Let's do an accelerator program. And it helped so much.
All right. Awesome. So what is one book that you would recommend?
Oh, I would recommend Elon Musk's autobiography or Richard Branson's. They are 2 just fascinating business leaders that I just love to get in their mind. Elon Musk especially. Love him or hate him. It's just fascinating hearing how he works.
Yeah, I might actually have to check that out. I haven't even thought about checking out like an autobiography of anybody, but real quick, what are some of like the key things you could take out of an autobiography? Like how can you, if you're going to read one, how can you approach that to like take insights out of it?
I always love learning about their leadership styles are really interesting and seeing what effects that has on their team. Like Elon Musk has a very interesting leadership style that gets results, but also has like, it has its pros and its cons. So I love just learning about their learnings and their mistakes. I love learning about their strategies, like what strategies have worked for them and what haven't. Reading an autobiography is kind of like having a mentor. Like you can learn from their mistakes and see what went well and what didn't go well. So that's what I always try and take out of it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So what is one business tool that you would recommend?
Honestly, it's so simple, but I just adore the Google suite. Like Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Sheets are just my life. Either that or another tool. I don't know if you guys have got this, like, or if it's as used over in the States, but Canva.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I use Canva.
Yes. Awesome. Canva, like our whole business is on Canva. I adore them. They're an Aussie company, actually, started by a Sydney girl, but they're such a great tool.
Yeah. I use it all the time. So that's really cool. So how do you schedule your time and plan things ahead?
Poorly. No, for me, I'm still very old school. Like I love my color codes. I love to be visual. Like I've literally got here on a little visual art diary my to-do list for the week. So I just carry around like a little visual art diary or notebook everywhere I go. I write stuff down. I color code it. I space it out. Yeah, that's what I love to do.
All right, cool. So last question here. How do you get focused and stay productive when you have a lot of stuff that you have to get done?
That's a really good question. It's a skill that I kind of honed throughout year 12 is just learning how my body works. So in year 12, I was like studying full time. I was also pretty much working full time running my business. And I kind of had to learn how my body works so I could chunk my day that way. So for example, I'd wake up early in the morning and do some emails and just get a head start on the day. And then I'd go to school just like a normal student. I'd like do a bit of emails, do a bit of really light work while I'm also in class, and try and get as much schoolwork done during the day as possible. I get home and I'd always have I found a 20-minute nap was perfect for me. Like just have a nap for 20 minutes and then I'm like good to go until midnight, 2 a.m. And then throughout the evening, I'd spend an hour or two just hanging with my family and just on social media chatting to friends. And then I'd say, okay, cool, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, I can do some creative work because a lot of my friends will still be online, but I can start to just get those creative juices flowing. And then by 9 or 10 o'clock, a lot of my friends were starting to go to bed. So I'm like, great, this is where I can go hardcore, write reports, write assignments, write proposals, and do that sort of hardcore work. So I always say just figure out how your body works best and view your mind as an artificial intelligence or a computer and see if you can hack it a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's awesome. One thing that I've heard a lot of from other people is that it seems very common for people to work on very in-depth kind of difficult things after most people go to bed, either late at night or even early in the morning. I've talked to almost 20 different people now on this podcast, and over 2/3 of them say that they work on their most difficult stuff either late at night or early in the morning. So I find that kind of interesting.
Absolutely. I always say anything that I had scheduled from 9 to 5, I can guarantee is going to go out the window. When people are online, when I'm having meetings and stuff that I'd planned to get done, never gets done. But also too, I find even little things as well. So for example, I'm really into just tea, herbal teas, and finding different teas that can almost hack body hacks. So I've got this yerba mate tea that's got more caffeine in it than coffee does, but it has a slower release and a slower drop. And then I've got other teas that help me go to sleep, digest food, that sort of stuff as well. I adore.
Yeah, I like some of that stuff too. I'm a big tea fan as well. So, well, you gave some great information about your story and about personal branding. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that. But before we wrap up, I'll have you provide a main takeaway for everyone listening.
Ooh, main takeaway. It'd actually probably be something that I always say to my student. If you guys are wanting to get started on anything, whether it's building a business, whether it's starting a personal brand or doing anything else, my advice is to just say yes to any opportunity that comes your way. And it may sound simple, but be a good human. I always say it's surprising how far a smile and a positive attitude is going to get you. People will reflect whatever sort of attitude you put out. So if you're happy, if you're positive, and if you go into things with with good intentions, people will mirror that back to you. So say yes and be a good human.
Absolutely. That's a great main takeaway. Last thing here, where can we find more about you and Bop?
Good question. Our SEO is pretty good. So if you Google Scott Millar or Bop, that'll come up. I've done a couple of TED Talks, a whole bunch of interviews, that sort of stuff. But if you head to www.bopindustries.com or head to iamscottmiller.com, you can find out a bit more about me and also about the company. Instagram, I totally forgot. I put everything on my Insta stories, my whole life. So if you just follow Scott_Miller_ on Instagram, you can see behind the scenes of how Bop runs and what I get to do in my day-to-day.
All right, awesome. I'll put all three of those in the show notes so everyone listening can go check them out. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Really glad that I was able to share Scott's story with all of you guys. Thanks again for being on the show, Scott. And thanks to everyone listening right now. I truly appreciate your support on this journey. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more amazing entrepreneurial stories and advice. And I encourage you to go check out studentbuiltstartups.com to find the highlights of the episode as well as the links to everything that we talked about. Thanks again, and I'll catch you on the next episode.